My name is Paul Murray. I am the Vice President of the Global Peace Foundation in the United States. With me this evening, I'm very happy to introduce to you Reverend Kenneth Bae, who is with the Nehemiah Global Initiative, and Sandra Fahy, who is from Sophia University in Tokyo. So let me start with Sandra. Sandra, share a little bit about yourself, would you please?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet Reverend Bae. I've read your work, and so I look forward to the discussion. So my name is Sandra Fahy. I was raised in Canada, and I did my 2 degrees there, and I was really interested in the subject of famine survivors and what famine survivors' stories would be like if they had the chance to tell them themselves. I had a background in genocide and Holocaust studies and was really familiar with those testimonies and knew that nobody had done research with famine survivors. So in my early 20s, I decided to move to South Korea and learn the language. And many South Koreans were really shocked that that's what I was doing. That's why I was in South Korea, to learn Korean to speak to North Koreans. Then I did my PhD in the UK, and my first book is based on, I finished the PhD, and then the first book is based on those testimonies that I collected during my PhD period. So that's how I got interested in North Korea, primarily through the famine.
Excellent. I want to talk a little bit more about your book in a few minutes, but I want to, Kenneth Bae, if you could share a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm Kenneth Bae. I was born in South Korea. My family immigrated to the United States when I was 16. So I ended up graduating from college and seminaries. I became missionary to China. And then while I was working in China, I was able to go in and out of North Korea. And I was able to bring about 300 tourists, the Christian tourists, to North Korea to see the land and pray and worship inside North Korea. And then at the end of the whole completing 300 people, there was my 18th trip that I was actually detained in North Korea. And then the North Korean government sentenced me 15 years hard labor sentence. So I became the longest held American prisoner in North Korea since Korean War. So I was actually in North Korea for 735 days. And then I was released. Now I'm working. I founded an organization called Nehemiah Global Initiative. We're working with North Korean refugees leaving North Korea, entering into South Korea right now.
Interesting. Yeah. You know, it's amazing because a lot of people have not really paid a lot of attention to the issues of North Korea until this administration in the United States has had these meetings with Kim Jong-un. And I think that as we're bringing awareness to what is going on, there is this call for a unification of North and South Korea coming back together. And when we think about that, there's a discussion about how do you do it? And one of the issues that's brought up often is about religious freedom and human rights. And so when we think about religious freedom and human rights, are those 2 separate things, Reverend Bae, or are they can they be combined together, or how do they connect?
Well, I do believe that it's actually fundamentally the same issue. Religious freedom is basically the basic human right that everybody should have, regardless of which country, which region you're from. And I do believe that the North Korea government has a restriction on the religious freedom and human rights issues, and other issues, freedom of speech and freedom of mobilities and many different type of freedom, they are still being limited. But I think the greatest concern that we see is that there's no freedom of religion and faith, and then there's pretty much detain them in their own culture, their own system for 25 million North Korean people living in there. So I do believe that when we're talking about freedom of faith issues, it's actually, we just need to see it as a general human right issues for humanity.
Sure. Sandra, what do you think when you're hearing about religious freedom and human rights?
Well, we just had that very interesting, kind of roundtable discussion about this topic, and it was very intellectually stimulating. And it was interesting for me also to be with, reverends and bishops and pastors, and, because, I approach it from human rights. And it was so nice to be able to say, to offer some insights from that angle, because The article in the UDHR, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, that talks about religious freedom doesn't mention the word God. So it's the ability to believe or not believe and to meet and discuss about these beliefs and to have the ability to do that without interference from the government. So the separation of church and state. So those things are really important. And then I would extend it further to engage the issue of freedom of expression and freedom to meet with people, freedom of assembly. I remember in your book you were detained because you had something on a hard drive or on an MP3, something that you had forgotten was there. And so there you see the mixing of those two things. You have somebody who is a spiritual, religious individual, and then you have this issue around what types of information one can and cannot have. So in the case of North Korea, belief in anything that's not Juche and the leadership is already embargoed. They treat Juche ideology as, some could argue, a state religion. We've even heard today it referred to as a nation cult, which, there is some accuracy to that, I would say. But for North Korea, they say in their own rhetoric that they do have freedom of religion. So they say these things. It's identified in the Constitution as well, and it appears in North Korea's own human rights report that they presented to the United Nations. And yet in that same literature, they say that everybody has just happened to have chosen Juche. So it's really interesting to see how all these issues come together. So it's a conflation of these. You have to have freedom of expression. You have to give people the ability to decide, do they want to become Christian? Do they want to be Protestant? And then I'll just say one other thing, which is that, Pyongyang used to be considered, what do they call it? The Jerusalem of the East.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
So there was this religious belief in Korea, and then one of the first things that they did was to remove all of that, because Kim Il-sung knew that religious belief was a threat, knew that was genuine, a version of, you could say, a civil society, that was a kind of community that's separate from the state that would be a threat to any kind of leadership.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you think about that and what is currently going on, I want you to share a little bit, Ken, about your book. But before you do that, Sandra's talking about what is happening there. You've lived it. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to share a little bit about your experience for those that are watching, to kind of get an understanding of the depth and the breadth of persecution in North Korea from what you've experienced, and then how do you see it today?
I work as a missionary. I'm still a missionary, Christian missionaries. So when I visited Korea for first couple of times, I saw just human being, the people living there, living under different system.
Right.
And then there's a limitation in what type of freedom they can have. And therefore, what I knew, understanding was that, people living there, they're supposed to have freedom of faith, freedom of religions. However, how the governments govern them, it doesn't reflect that constitutional right they have. So what I decided to do is that, what if we bring foreigners from outside to go into North Korea, and then we exercise our freedom of faith inside North Korea, because they said they do have freedom of faith for everybody. So therefore, they should tolerate however we practice our own faith in North Korea. As long as we're not offending them, we're not proselytizing them. Simply, we just pray among ourselves, worship among ourselves. It shouldn't be any problem for anybody. And that's what I was told. That's why I brought 300 Christians around the world to North Korea over 23 different trips. And then at the end, they arrested me not because I was worshiping, but because I brought a hard drive contained Western, a documentary film about North Korea, about children picking up the garbage from the floor, eating noodle from the third floor, something like that, and they were offended by the content of it.
How did they get that information? How did they?
It was on my hard drive.
And did they confiscate your hard drive?
Yes. So I accidentally brought in the hard drive into North Korea. And then they discovered that they found a couple of documentary movie about North Korea. So that was the whole, that's why I was arrested. There wasn't anything other than that.
What was your charge?
But at the end, they found out that I was a missionary. And then they found out that I brought people there to pray and worship. And then they charged me that I was trying to overthrow the government of North Korea through prayer and worship. So I argue with them that you don't believe in God. Why do you believe in prayer? Why do you think that that's a powerful weapon against your governments? And then this is what they said: is that what if one person become Christian, and then start an orphanage or some sort of school, then 10 children will become Christians, and 10 will become 100 become 10,000 someday. Do you think they're going to be threat to us or not? And they said that they're not afraid of nuclear weapon of United States because they will never use it against them first. U.S. will never attack them first. However, they said that someone bringing the religion into the country, someone like me, a missionary coming in the praying and worship, eventually will win the heart of the people, and they will lose control of the people, and then everybody turned to God, and they said this country will become God's countries. So they said that I was the most dangerous American criminal they ever apprehended since Korean War, because I was trying to bring religion into the countries. So I did realize that North Korea, that what they're most afraid of, that there are different type of freedom they're limiting, but freedom of faith, freedom of religion is the most dangerous things they view, that as the U.S. and other nations will use it against them to win the heart of the people. When the religions get to the people, and the people will eventually quit loving the Father, the Kim Il Sung, and everybody return to Christianity rather than from Juche system.
But the Korean Constitution states that you can have freedom of religion, but it qualifies it by stating that as long as there's no type of insurrection against the government. So what you're saying to me is that any form of religion that they don't like, they will use that clause to confiscate or to arrest. And then what happens when you're arrested? Is there a trial? What was the process that you went through?
So I went through a 4.5 month of a pre-trial period, and I was actually, and then the trial only lasted about 90 minutes. And then the result of the trial was I was given a 15 years of hard labor sentence. I was the first American was sent to North Korean labor camp since Korean War. So it was the consequences for someone like me, that bringing people to North Korea to love the people, pray for people, and they see it is that this is actually a direct threat. And if we allow someone like you continue to do so, then eventually our country will fall, and people will not going to listen to what they were saying to us anymore.
So
I have a question that I'd like to ask, if that's all right. I'm a little curious about the details of their inspection of your, if I may, this is the researcher in me coming out.
Right. Yeah.
Had they inspected your computer drive before this?
No.
And then when they did, went into the computer, were they flipping through the video files? Just tell me a little bit about that process.
Normally, I will never take any type of hard drive or computer to North Korea, because it bring on complications. But I made a mistake by bringing a hard drive into North Korea. So what they did
was it just a USB?
It was just a portable computer hard drive.
Okay, yeah.
So it was so it was probably pretty much my backup hard drive for my laptop. So it has all the information on my computer. It was actually on the desk, on the hard drive. and therefore they pretty much went through every single file just to see.
This is on your departure from North Korea.
No, actually, they're entering in. When I was
Oh.
entering into North Korea,
Okay.
this is when they discovered that I had a hard drive on me. That they were trying to scan the information, and then they immediately found this video, and then they, then everybody was called in and trying to see what the video was, which is about the children begging on the street.
Yeah.
So what?
Okay. Thank you.
Sandra, you've written 2 books, Marching Through Suffering, and then also Dying for Rights. So how do you see Korea when it comes to human rights and religious freedom today?
Well, you asked and you used the word Korea, and so I just want to identify.
Thank you for-
No, it's fine. That even in South Korea there are issues with the national security laws, and so which restrict the rights of South Koreans as well. And there are separated families still to this day that are also in the United States, or now we know with defectors in other countries, whose the right to have a family relationship, the right to be able to leave your country, to be able to return to your country, these are not possible to participate in. But in terms of North Korea, as I said, like from the formation of the country, the Kim Il-sung saw that religion had to be stamped out. Very soon after that, the system of Songbun was put in place. And so this is where people are categorized. I think there's 51 classifications, according to political loyalty, on down to people who would be identified as hostile. And so anyone with a religious background, anyone who was religious, anybody who had connections with the southern part of the peninsula or anything to do with the Americans or Allied forces during the Korean War would be placed in a lower class. So there's that factor.
So in the classes, though, if you're in a particular class, how does that have an impact with you living in North Korea? I mean, are you in a labor camp from the beginning once you're classified, or is it income-based? I mean, what is the impact?
So Robert Collins has written a very interesting report, which is freely available online. Anyone can take a look for it. And he basically identifies all the issues related to Songbun. So in terms of access to food, so basic nutritional needs are distributed according to Songbun, what kind of occupation one can have, what part of the country one can and cannot live in. That doesn't imply, mind you, that all people with wavering class are up in the northern provinces, but it certainly implies that within Pyongyang you won't find people who are of a lower Songbun. Also in terms of who you could marry, I don't know if I already said that, what kind of education you're able to attain. So for instance, you would not be able to be a journalist. They have that field of work in North Korea, or a teacher, if your class is of lower Songbun.
See, if you're class of lower, class Songbun, and then you can even go to college or not even enter into militaries. So if you're in North Korea, in order to succeed, then you have to be a graduate of a college, and you have to be also you have to go to army. You have to finish the army. These are the basic things that they can move up to the next letters. But if you belong to the lower class, and that even those privilege is not even available. So they will know it if even though they were entering the elementary school or middle school, they already know that they're not going to college. They're not able to enter into military service, and then they have to limit it on the place where they live. The job that they can have is very, very limited for these people. And so I'm hearing a lot of story that the people growing up, that I'm smart, I'm able to go to college just because my grandfather, fought in the Korean War in the other side, and this is why I'm limited. So they're hating their father and grandfather for not able for them to do anything in North Korea. So these kind of things, dilemmas, I see that happen quite a bit in North Korea.
So when an individual is arrested or taken because of religious issues, that has an impact not just on that individual, but does it also have an impact on the family?
What I was told is that if you are professing the faith in Christianity, and they will arrest you, and they'll arrest their parents, and even children, 3 generations to be wiped out or put them in the political prisons. So that's what I was told in North Korea, but I haven't been able to be confirmed, and I haven't met anybody who escaped to tell me that story. But it is actually very difficult for anyone to even attain the hearing about other than 주체 system. Other than 주체, there's no opportunity for them to hear anything. For give you an example, when I was being questioned in North Korea for the first month, one of the officials from National Security Bureau asked me sincerely this question. I heard about God before, never heard about Jesus before. So I only heard Jesus from you. So tell me where does Jesus live, in Korea or in China? But he was born in Pyongyang. He's a graduate of this college in Pyongyang. He's 30-some years old, working for National Security Bureau. Yet still has not heard the name Jesus before. So this is a reality in Pyongyang. Used to be Jerusalem Far East. The people living in Pyongyang have no chance to hear name of Jesus. It's not available. Name of Jesus is not available in any books, any newspaper, any magazine, or even movies. In the 1960s, during the 1960s, when Juche ideology is entering in, they demolished, trying to erase everything about Christianity, but including the name of Jesus. So that
This was back in the 50s when they
back
did
in the
that?
60s.
60s, okay.
When the Juche was established, Juche ideology was established. So that the people of, so now I'm working with many North Korean refugees who fled North Korea to South Korea. I met hundreds of people so far, but I haven't met anyone who heard the name of Jesus before they escaped from North Korea. So this is a reality so it's not just the people being persecuted, their churches are being persecuted, but it's not that. It's pretty much eliminations. So that's why I think that when the official told me that if someone become Christian, the 3 generations to be wiped out, because this is a treason against the governments. You're worshiping other than the Kim Il-sung himself. That means you are enemy of the state.
So when we're looking at the human rights violations and issues in North Korea, you published a book, Dying for Rights, which really speaks to human rights. Can you expound a little bit on that?
Sure. Well, actually, it's going to be published in September 2019.
Well, see, I told you I already published it.
Yeah, well, it's on Google Books. So that book, the subtitle, so it's Dying for Rights, and the subtitle is Putting North Korea's Rights Abuses on the Record. And basically, what that book does is try to consolidate a picture for readers of the spectrum of human rights violations that have happened in North Korea since its founding to the present. And the book is taking place over 2 sections. The first section looks at the crimes that have been committed toward the North Korean people, toward foreigners in North Korea, and by the North Korean state in other countries. That's the first part of the book.
Can you give us a couple of examples of what kind of crimes you're talking about?
Well, okay, so first of all, the text begins by looking at, I categorize human rights. This is the easiest way to deal with them. So you have social and economic rights. Generally, this is how they're understood. Freedom of expression, access to food, freedom of movement, and then you have civil and political rights. So the right to vote, the right to assembly, the right not to be arbitrarily detained, the right to be free from torture, etc. So I look at all of these, and I also look at the crimes against humanity that North Korea does commit systematically, part of the government campaign. And then the other part of the book looks at how North Korea denies these human rights violations and the different aspects of state media, international engagement, foreigners that it uses as a way to float its ideology to the international community.
So as we're looking at the human rights issues in North Korea, what are some examples of human rights violations in North Korea? Sandra, Ken?
Okay, well, First of all, you can take the case of somebody who is now living in South Korea who is a defector. And why did they leave North Korea in the first place? And often, the reasons are varied. Most people who are defectors in South Korea today have left North Korea because they wanted to improve their economic situation in North Korea. So the question naturally arises, why can't North Koreans improve their own economic situation, right? The way we could do in South Korea or Japan or wherever else. The reason is because amsijang, like the black markets or the changmadang, it wasn't tolerated by the state. It was illegal for a long time. Now it's mostly tolerated, but the type of things you might be interested in buying, maybe you need to work with some people who are smuggling goods from China back into the country. Maybe you're interested in doing some fishing, that's gathering fish and then selling it in the market. Maybe you're going over to China quite a few times. This all gets very suspicious to the North Koreans. They're no longer satisfied with the bribes that you're giving them along the border. And the next thing you know, you might be detained and accused of being a spy. This is a classic one that North Korea uses over and over. When you're detained, if you're a woman, of course, we can imagine the types of things that could happen to you. A woman biologically is set up to be more vulnerable to human rights violations if she's raped, if she has been raped in China, if she's carrying the child of a Chinese man or assumed to be. So there's all kinds of issues that happen there in terms of forced abortion or sexual harassment or indeed rape in the case of detention centers, or for men as well. This type of thing can happen, and just all kinds of grave abuses. So these things kind of crescendo. You can see how the failure to uphold certain basic rights, freedom of information, freedom to buy and sell what you want, set up a business, let it fail, set up another one. These basic rights kind of crescendo the individual into greater rights violations that then cause more suffering. So I just want to say one other thing, which is, earlier you guys were speaking about Songbun and this idea. Songbun actually means like an inheritance. It's like your ingredients, your own ingredients. What are your political ingredients? And if your father had some connection with South Korea or, was religious or whatever, then your own ingredients politically are questionable. So if you've been trading or, the notion is that then you're almost demonic and that, that has to be removed. There is little opportunity from what I can see in the research that I've done for any kind of retribution or forgiveness. And sometimes it is, put to Kim Jong-un, like, oh, please forgive me for the mistakes I've made. You see this with foreigners, like Merrill kind of gave his signature on the stamp, I made a mistake, a grave error to the North Korean people. And so there's forgiveness made to foreigners, but it's rarely given to North Korean people. And I could go on.
Sure. Ken, do you have an ad regarding human rights?
Pretty much in North Korea, there's no freedom of religions, freedom of speech, no freedom of even mobility. So even you can't even travel from one town to the other town without you have to have some sort of government documentation and permission slip before you can go to another town. Wow. So the people are confined in their own area. So if you're people living in the different part of the North Korea, that if they want to go see Pyongyang, the capital city, it's not possible. They have to either find many different channels in order to even that they would have to give the permission for that person to go, but you have to have a reason to go, and that permission need to be given first. Even the permission is given, and there's a problem. The problem is there's no transportation. There's no public transportation for them to take. There's a train they can take sometime from the way up in the northern province if they want to come down to Pyongyang, which is only about 700 kilometers away, 600 kilometers away. But sometime it may take 10 days to get there by train. You're talking about the train coming and going, and then there's no power. They have to stop for a couple of days, and So it's really difficult. Even they have a right to go, even it's really difficult for them to go. And when I was in prison, talking to the guard, and the guard was saying that is how's life in South Korea. So I say, there's about 10% of people maybe they'll call it high class, maybe 20% bottom, 20% will be low class. The middle class people will be 70% of people. And then life in middle class in South Korea is like this. I said they're living in the home or apartment somewhere, whether it's rental or their own. They have a couple of cars, they send kids to college, then take a vacation to overseas a couple of times a year. And then the reaction was, no way, it's not possible. Where is the money? Where is traveling permissions? Where even can you leave the country even you want to? They said something like this is unreal, and they think this is not even. They can't even think about it. They said they can't even take a vacation to the East Coast because the reality is there's no vacation. So even people get married. The honeymoon is just for the one that the day that you get married, wedding day is your honeymoon day, and that's it. There's no traveling. You're taking a cruise to somewhere else, and nothing like that. So for people living like this, the basic human right issues. It's not something the North Korean government talk about. They said we have everything. We have freedom. We have freedom of education, freedom of housings, and we have medication is all free. So what else do you need? But in realities, there is no free medication any longer. There's no free education because not everybody can go to college anyway. And then also for housing issue. There are no money for governments. So governments cannot provide housing for the people. And then pretty much labor is free. Right. So that's why it's a free labor for everybody. So that means that there's no actual, the pay is given for the people, and then they make everybody slave, and the slave nation now.
So basically it sounds like in a closed country like North Korea that there are no human rights. Basically, unless you meet certain...
The people who left the country, they enter into South Korea. This is when they first hear about human rights.
Right.
And said, oh, do we have a right? These kind of right was given?
But actually, there's something I would add to that because, so the first thing I'd like to add is that you have to imagine, and of course you can't because you've been there, but these are individuals who for generations have only known this kind of system. Yes. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is actually North Koreans have heard the term inkwon, human rights. But the way the North Korean regime frames that term, the way they take that word and package it with meaning is something that in fact, it's not in their interest. So the conception of human rights, kind of like the way that when North Koreans go into China and they first encounter Christianity, they first encounter a pastor who's praying with, they'll kind of have this shock because it is so reminiscent of their experiences of life review sessions and self-criticism sessions, which I should add is another aspect of surveillance and social control in North Korea, that we would report on each other. Sometimes we might agree with what we're reporting on, but we would report on each other about the crimes we've committed or the things we've done wrong in the last week. But so the way North Korea talks about human rights is that you have a duty to the state, to be respectful to the state, to uphold juche, to do the work that's asked of you, and that sovereignty, state sovereignty, is the main human right.
It's a one for all for one. Mm-hmm. And therefore, in order for the governments and the country to succeed, individual human right is not relevant. They can need to sacrifice a certain point as long as you see the good of, for a mass. Right. But normally just for one person, which is the Kim Jong-un.
So that leads me to this question is, what's being done right now? How, what impact can we have in North Korea when it comes to human and religious rights, religious freedom and human rights? I know that you're working on an effort called the Nehemiah Project. Can you
Yes, we have something called Nehemiah Solutions, and the project is when I was in North Korea, the people remembered me while I was in prison, and they prayed for me, and they advocate for my in my behalf, and hundreds of people writing letters and calling their senators and congressmen and trying to find a way to see if they can get me released. So in the same idea is that if people around the world, and especially in the U.S. and other nations, are able to try so hard to try to get the one person out of North Korea, what will happen what will it take to get 25 million people to be free, just like I was free? So one of the things that I'm doing is something called Nehemiah Prayer Petition Campaign. About 177,000 people signed the petition to President Obama, trying to say that please bring Kenneth Bae home. So now I'm asking people around the world that if we can get the people around the world to pray and remember and stand with North Korean people, then I do believe that when that day comes, then I do see that the freedom for 25 million will be also take place. So I want to see, it's called Nehemiah 1 Million Prayer Petition Campaign. People can go to nk.org to sign online. Now people from 64 different countries, around closer to 5,000 people are now signed up, and they're now praying and remembering, and they're trying to do everything they can in their own way, try to get the issues of the human rights issues, religious freedom issues for North Korean people. Another thing that we're doing is, I do believe that in order to improve the human rights issue, we need to let the people around the world know what is really happening in North Korea. Right. Many people have no idea what kind of suffering they're enduring, what kind of human condition they're living in. So one of the things that Nehemiah Project is getting the truth out of to the nation, to the people around the world, and let them know that what's happening now in North Korea, what should be done, and this kind of being a voice or advocate for their behalf is something that now I am constantly traveling and speaking in different places. Along the way, that I do believe that there's one possible way. I do believe that this is one sure way to improve the human rights condition for North Korean people living in North Korea is to get them out of North Korea. If we cannot improve the North Korean human rights issues, as long as the current regime is still practicing the way they're practicing, but the individual people living inside, if they say, you know what, I don't want to stay here anymore, I want a better human right for myself and my children, and then for economic reasons, many other reasons, they will come out. So now I'm doing is, as the U.S. government sent a special envoy to get me home, if they already decided to come out to China and they're asking for help to get to South Korea, we are doing the rescue operation for the people who are reaching out to us. Please save us. Please take us to South Korea. So we are raising finance so that they'll be able to come all the way to South Korea. So that's one of the best way to ensure human rights condition for the people living in. What happened in the East and West Germany, that when the massive number of people start leaving East Germany to West Germany, and this is when the war came down, and then this is when the two countries will become unified. So the last thing for Nehemiah Project is focusing in the unification of the Korean Peninsula. Because in the bottom line is, how can we improve the human rights conditions, even though we can't really trying to persuade Kim Jong-un to change his mind right now. But the best way is, if the two countries become united, then the human rights issue conditions, issues, and nuclear standoff is all problem will be solved. But how can we, at this point, talk about unification of two Korea? And so that is, I do believe that one of the ways we can do it is if we can if we can win the heart of the North Korean people living in North Korea, then I think then there is the stand for unification is possible. But how can we win the heart of North Korean people? Then then first you need to win the heart of the refugees already out of North Korea. We have 33,000 people living in South Korea. If we can talk to North Korean refugees and they realize that United States and South Korea is not there to crush them and make everybody slave, but if we find a way for them to win the refugees' heart, refugees will connect with people living inside. And then I think there is a ground for unification, which is free, democratic. The people as human rights is no longer the issues for the people living in North Korea.
You know, you and I had the opportunity a little while ago to attend in Washington, D.C., the State Department's Ministerial on International Religious Freedom. And in that, they had 190 different countries that came to this convening put on by the State Department. And there were many sidebar sessions going on in addition to the main focus with the State Department. When you see the work that the U.S. State Department is trying to do you think their approach is appropriate or can be effective with North Korea?
Yes, I do believe that. Yes, even though President Trump is not talking about human rights issues up front, but I do see that the State Department is continuing to speak up about human rights conditions in North Korea through a different channel. So I do believe that that's actually a good approach. And also, when I said inviting, I was talking to the people in State Departments and Congress that please invite North Korean refugees and hear them out, what their concern is, what is their most difficult thing they have endured, and then you need to know where they come from. And then also what's on their mind. If there's certain thing you can help, that'll directly influence life, people living in North Korea or refugees in China. That was one of my suggestions when I visited State Department a couple of years ago. I do see that the last couple of years, more refugees are being invited, and then they're visiting even White House and speaking to the president. So I do believe that this is a right path for letting the North Korean government know that yes, I know there's an issue is nuclears, but human rights is equally important. I think this is, even though they're not directly telling North Korea to change their issues or the condition right now.
Okay. Sandra, you participated in an expert roundtable on religious freedom and human rights. During that convening, there was some discussion about next steps or what could you do. Can you share a little bit about some of the ideas that have come about to address religious freedom and what can we do to help infuse that into North Korea?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily set religious freedom apart from a host of other rights that North Koreans should have. As we understand, human rights kind of work in a clustered sense, that if you don't have, it's not, we always speak of them as a plurality. It's not as if you're just lacking one of them, right? So there's a few points that I'd like to say about that, which is that, first of all, in 2014, the United Nations formed a commission. Well, this was in 2013, and then they produced their report, which found that there were crimes against humanity happening in North Korea. That report came about, that research came about, the commission, because there had been decades of pressure from NGOs in South Korea, elsewhere, Korean American communities, asking for the world's strongest body on human rights to take a look at this. So this is huge that this happened. And the fact that the United Nations found that there were crimes against humanity happening, the UN asked North Korea to participate in this report repeatedly.
Right.
And what do you think North Korea did in response? They ignored the requests. They ignored them, and instead produced their own documentaries which denounce the United Nations, South Korea, defectors, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of human rights, where things are changing is that here we have North Korea yes, they're denying that there are human rights violations, but they're actually also engaging with the international community. So this is something that's very important. But there's one critical aspect of the situation in North Korea, which is different from what we see in other cases, because there's no country that doesn't have human rights violations. This is very simply, we can say this, yeah? Even Trump says, oh, you know, the situation's bad. Well, the situation's bad in a lot of places. Oh, thank you, Trump, so wise. But he's missing the point, yeah? Right. The point is that we're talking about North Korea. What's different about North Korea is that there is no civil society.
That's right.
There's no ability for people to assemble and chat with each other as we're talking here. About whatever they wish to talk about, yeah? Whether it be Juche or Jesus or whatever it is that they want to talk about. So why is that important? A civil society, the absence of a civil society means that people cannot lobby for their own interests to the body, which is primarily tasked with taking care of them, which is their nation state. Yeah? If we don't like something about South Korea, we can cause a protest, we can demand to our government that our interests be met, and if our government ignores us, then we can go to the international community and ask for help. But in the case of North Korea, it's defectors who have to do that. And I would add something to what Reverend Bae has said, which you said, and I think it was just a slip of the tongue, that when North Koreans leave North Korea, then their human rights problem is solved. Well, actually, that's not true at all. And you know that very well. Even for those who are in China who try to help North Koreans, be they foreigner or Chinese, sometimes are killed by North Koreans, yeah, because of the work that they're doing. North Koreans who go into China suffer all kinds of horrendous rights violations.
So what I meant is when they come to South Korea.
But even still, because Hwang Jong-yeop, Tae Young-ho, they're all hunted. They're hunted. So North Korea's reach as a violator of human rights is global.
It goes beyond North Korea.
And in fact, I will just say a few other things. Let me just, because I know I need to get this out there. Hopefully it'll stay on the video. How do you get North Korea interested in doing something? By showing them that it's in their own interest. So they have a network of prison camps. But they also have an issue with tuberculosis and multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis. Well, they also have people who are guarding those prison camps who are not prisoners, yeah? But those guards have connections with their families. Well, prisons have huge problems with tuberculosis and MDR-TB. If we can show North Korea that it's actually in their interest to treat prisoners, yeah, in terms of their health, then we can improve the basic health of those prisoners, perhaps give them information about other things, yeah? And then, so you have to translate the interest. North Korea uses the US dollar on the black market. They don't use the US dollar because they like America. They use it because it has value. And if we can take that metaphor and apply it to human rights as well, show the North Korean government that it is in their interest if they want to maintain sovereignty. And of course, I understand this issue of reunification, unification. I'm sympathetic to that. Yeah, it's something that, but sadly, neither Korea has an agreement on what that would look like, which is the problem, yeah? And in the interest of human rights, is unification necessary? Actually not, yeah? You just need to ensure that both states respect the rights of their citizens to the fullest possible degree, and that they can move between each state and visit each other, yeah? That they can do all these things. Well, why doesn't North Korea want to respect those basic rights, yeah? To the information you had on your hard drive? Because they know absolutely it would destroy the system that they have created. They know that if people get access to information, no sane person would choose the type of government that they have created.
That's why Bible says truth will set people free.
Right.
When they realize the truth about North Korea, what they've been feeding in, or the lies they have learned, and then that'll be all over. I do believe that. So that's why eventually the regime will crumble, and then North and South will be united. The reason for unification is we used to be one country.
That's right.
And this is by foreign powers, the country was divided. And so people are longing from both sides that one united as a family, and the relatives that haven't seen each other for 70 years before people passed, and they want to get together. So I do believe that the desire is there, and then but just like you said, the governments haven't decided what kind of, because it doesn't really, you can't really mix water and and oil in the same pot. So something had to change. But in order for that to see happen, I think graduate human rights, the issues that need to be improved, that will be the first, the point, first step to get to the unification, I do believe so.
So here in South Korea, there's a group that came together, and it's called the International Coalition for Religious Freedom in North Korea, that is formed to really address these issues. Kenneth, is there anything that you think the viewer would be interested in hearing, and maybe a unique perspective of what is going on and what you're doing that you can share with folks?
I set up a couple of organizations, one is called Nehemiah Global Initiative, to help the North Korean refugees settling into South Korea, and then also talking about human rights issues, and then become a voice for the voiceless for people in North Korea. But there's another NGO that I just started. It's called Nehemiah Nehemiah. Let me just make sure. Nehemiah Relief Fund. And then people can go to online to and take a look at the Nehemiah Relief Fund, and it's called nrfund.org. Practically, what we're trying to focusing is there anything we can do for the refugees that are coming out of North Korea? So we have something called Rescue Fund, and also have an area that we can help the people.
Does that help them come out of the country, or once they come out?
Actually, we're actually helping the people from North Korea all the way to South Korea.
Okay.
And then some of them already came out of North Korea, but they're in China hiding, or they were actually sold as a bribe to rural villagers. And then they said, no, we cannot stay here any longer because governments may find us, and then we will be sent back to North Korea. So they do reach out to us and say, please help. So we have set up the fund so that we can actually get these people out of the danger area, because nowadays with the Kim Jong-un regime, if they get caught in China, they get sent back to North Korea. Many of them ended up in political prison, or at least go to the regular labor camp for 5 to 10 years nowadays. It's really different than the Kim Jong-il's days, when they were able to go to detention center for 6 months or a year and then they come out. But now the penalties are a lot severe. And therefore, I do believe that it's not. So we're talking about human rights issues. If they just came out, they left North Korea because they were hungry, many of them, and there have no way for them to sustain themselves. There are many women that I'm meeting with. Some of them were like 19, 20, or 18 years old. Offer themselves to be sold to be a bribe to rural villager in China, because that's the only way for family to survive in North Korea. And then oftentimes there's many human rights violations taking place in China for them, abuse, sexual, physical abuse. And then they got caught and sent back to North Korea. They go through horrible human rights violation they have to endure by going back. Just because they were hungry, they left the country. So when things that continue going on nowadays, and we just cannot just look the other way and say, this is not our problem. So the people reaching out to us, we want to see every single people reach out to us to be able to rescue and then restore their life in South Korea. We help them to on with the resettlements, and then teach them English, to helping them find a job, to Medicares and different things that we are helping, so that they will feel that when they're in South Korea now they're safe. Now they can restart their life in South Korea, but they're all longing to go back to North Korea when doors open. So we are, we set up the Nehemiah Relief Fund so that we can actually provide emergency relief, and then also the scholarship and empowerment fund, so that the children's refugees that are coming in, and that we can help them with their educations. Even some of them were providing college or graduate school, tuition assistance and things like that, so that they will say, you guys are important to us, and you gotta see the revival once again will take place in Pyongyang when doors open. So there are certain things that we can do to remember and then rescue, restore, and rebuild North Korean refugees out of North Korea. And also the people living in North Korea, we need to continue to let people know that through the media, through we send rice and Bible and handwritten letters in a bottle and putting in the oceans, and then when the current is strong enough in the West Sea, and then current will take the bottle to North Korea. We've been doing it every month, last about 15 months now. And then we are hearing the report that people are actually getting it, and they're taking the rice, and then they were
So
curious about
you feed it
things.
in two ways, spiritually and physically.
Yeah, that's the idea, and emotionally with the letters say you are not forgotten, we love you. The people out there praying for you, hang in there. Sure. And these kind of letters that we've been sending in a bottle, and so these are like love letters in bottle that they'll be receiving. So these are things that the people can actually participate even now, so that we can save 25 million right now, but we can save one, and that one person in one church, one person in one community, and say not only save but adopt one family, whether they're in South Korea or ended up in U.S. or Canada, and then reach out to them and say you guys are important to us.
So you are doing work in North Korea. You get arrested in North Korea. You're put in a labor camp in North Korea, and then you come out, and now you're doing this global work to really have an impact, a positive impact, and that's really greatly to be commended. The work that you're doing and what you're attempting to do, and it's exciting to know that you don't have to do it by yourself. That all of us can participate in this. Sandra, I know that with the work that you're doing, you probably have some connections and networks. What can you offer for anybody that's interested in saying, hey, I want to be involved in some way? What would you share with them?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important, if people are interested in this topic, to read as much as possible, to really become armed with the facts and how to interpret the facts.
That's true.
Beyond Parallel is a great website, and they have a blog. It's run out of DC by Victor Cha and a few other professors at Georgetown University. In terms of activist work, I would encourage people to get in touch with LINK. It stands for Liberty in North Korea, a really fascinating organization which is doing incredible work. Also, I think Asia Press is very interesting. It's based out of Osaka, and Ishimaru Jiru, I think is his name. He's doing some work with underground journalism in North Korea, which is, I think, one of the most important things that needs to be done. And also Radio Free Asia. I think if people are interested in hearing the voices of North Koreans as they speak to their family back home in these broadcasts that are sent into North Korea. So that's what I would recommend.
Excellent, excellent. Some really good points here, and also opportunities for everyone to be engaged instead of just listening, just being active too. Mm-hmm. So thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.